Hello, everybody. This is Dave Thomas, Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Bales & Associates, and I want to thank you for attending our encore presentation today of reports, lists, queues to manage and supply chain. Today's presenters are David Williams and Betzy Mata Oquendo, and I'm Dave Thomas. And before we get started on the session, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of Bales & Associates. So Bales & Associates has been in the Infor ecosystem for over 26 years. We are entirely Infor focused, and we do nothing but Infor implementations, upgrades, and managed services. We support all aspects of the technology, including S3, Landmark, and Cloud Suite. The finance supply chain suite, the HCM suite, and all the technology and bolt-on products that Infor supplies. In fact, we've been recognized and given partnering awards in 8 out of the last 10 years. And our consultants bring 15 plus years of consulting experience in the space with the equivalent in professional services. Some were former benefits managers, compensation managers, directors of supply chain, as well as former controllers and CFOs. In 2021, we received an award by an organization called CLASS that we were very excited about. CLASS is a healthcare services organization that ranks companies that do business within the software implementation space. And we were ranked for 2020 as top in class, meaning we were the top implementer for rolling out Infor implementations within healthcare. We're really proud of that. And what that does is really stress that the processes and tools we use to implement Infor, regardless of the vertical, we have a good process and our customers are satisfied. Additionally, we had some great, exciting news on February 1st. Bales became part of a consulting organization called Nordic Consulting. Nordic's an industry-leading healthcare consulting firm. We'll operate as a wholly owned subsidiary and continue to be led by Jamie Bales as president. Nordic will provide us with resources to fund our growth, expand our business, and support our customers more effectively. For healthcare customers, it allows us to bring together Nordic's capabilities in the EHR space to provide a more holistic solution, including specific expertise in EHR and ERP integration. This combination will offer us a best practices model to reduce implementation risks and leverage the data from both systems to drive insights and outcomes. Again, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time on a Friday, and I will turn it over to the presenters.
Hi.
Hi. Wanted to read the disclaimer first.
Yes.
This is David Williams. Thank you again for attending. Looking forward to this presentation, as I'm sure you are too. We do have a disclaimer that this material is in reference to Infor version 11, Finance and Supply Chain Management System. This is for informational purposes only. We just want to provide you with considerations as you make the best decision for your organization. And as we read the disclaimer, information provided in this presentation is related to implementing, upgrading the Infor version 11 Cloud Suite financials. The material and information contained within this presentation, general information purposes only. You should not solely rely on the material and information contained therein as the basis for making business, legal, procedural, or system-related decisions. Bales makes no representations or warranties of any kind expressed or implied about the accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to the information presented for any purpose. Any reliance you place on such materials without consultation is therefore strictly at your own risk. It's highly recommended that you contact Bales & Associates, LLC, to make sure the solutions are tailored specifically to your needs. And with that, Betzy, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Betzy Mata Oquendo, and I am a senior consultant for Bales. I've been with Bales from 2015. I have 20 years experience in supply chain and with Lawson and the finance side. I will be helping David with this presentation, and I hope it's very interesting, and I'm hoping for a lot of questions to be able to help you make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Betzy. This is David Williams. I have extensive Infor supply chain application experience, specifically recently in the healthcare industry, and both in version 10 and 11. So let's look at the agenda today. We're going to be covering daily supply chain management list, weekly supply chain management list, and monthly supply chain management list. And then we'll have questions and a wrap up. So you survive, go live, what's next? And these are the topics that we're going to be covering both daily. I'll cover most of the daily down to EDI, and I'll hand it off to Betzy. That'll cover EDI all the way through weekly and monthly. So you've survived, go live, you've had all this documentation, you've got your processes worked out, everything looks good. So what's next? What's next? I want to give you a short experience story from when I went to a client, healthcare client, a few years ago. They had been on the system for quite some time, and they did not have this checklist of monitoring. What do I monitor on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? So we developed that, and it made a big difference. Another big aspect that we'll cover is not only does this make your operations more efficient as you monitor, it will also help you tremendously when you close the system each month. I kind of coordinated with our supply chain director. I did some months and she did some months, but I always dreaded when she asked me, David, will you close this month? Not because of the procedure per se, but I knew that I'd be facing some of these issues that we're going to be talking about today and how to get those resolved. So I think this will be a big benefit to you. So let's go through the daily supply chain task list. The first one is the daily is supply chain monitoring. So here we have unreleased buyer messages and open invoice messages. Those are the two kinds. The open invoice messages, which include PO cost messages and reconciliation messages, occur when accounts payable is adding an invoice and there's discrepancy between the invoice line cost quantity and the purchase order cost quantity that exceed the tolerances. The other type of message is a receiving message, and this is where the receiver is trying to receive more units than what's on your purchase order. So you'll want both types of messages resolved before closing the month. However, only one will prevent you from closing the month. You have a PO cost message. That invoice is still in an unreleased status, and the posting date would get updated when accounts payable close is performed in an update mode. This will not prevent you from closing purchase order. However, if you don't answer them, this could delay payment to the vendor and result in being put on hold if you're not consistently monitoring that queue. Options for answering cost messages are accept work and smart reconciliation, accepting the PO price, or adjust cost, adjusting PO cost to invoice cost and paying the invoice price. Or you can forward this message to another buyer to respond. If it's a reconciliation message due to quantity, your options are to approve, charge back, or go forward with it. If you have open receiving buyer messages, all lines must be released before the receiver can be released. This will keep you from closing purchase order at the end of the month because all receipts must be in a release status. If you're familiar with the month-end close process, one of the first things we do is to check to see if there's any unreleased receipts. Again, the options for answering these messages are accept the overshipment. Then you need to manually go back and release the receipt or return, which is returning items to the vendor. You'll specify the return quantity and release receipt. It's recommended that you have the buyers, and I want to point out at the bottom of this slide, the responsibility. Monitor the messages daily because they are routed to the buyer assigned on the purchase order. So the next is unreleased purchase order receipts. This includes open buyer messages, duplicate receipt headers, abandoned receipts, waiting for the buyer to add PO lines, and so forth. Unreleased PO receipts are when you have not completed the receiving functions of the goods. Obviously, if you have inventory items, this is going to affect stock on hand. And I've seen that happen where the receiving personnel walk away from it, they forget. Sometimes the workload is so heavy it just doesn't get done. They get distracted. Obviously, keep in mind an invoice cannot be matched until the receipt is released. So again, you're having an impact on the vendor. As I mentioned in the previous slide, a reason you may have an unreleased receipt to be that you're trying to receive more than the PO allowed, and which resulted in that receiving buyer message to be worked. Another reason could be that you created the receipt header twice. Again, it goes, this process, as we all know, it takes focus, and we all get distracted and pushed away with different responsibilities, so that can happen. Abandoned receipt. You started the process, but get pulled away. That just elaborated. Another reason that you could started to create a receipt, you find an item is missing off the PO, so you're working with the buyer to add the item to the purchase order, and you keep the receipt open rather than backing it out and deleting it. Again, the financial implications are accounts payable cannot pay the invoice. This could cause a delay in the payment to the vendor. Notice the responsibility below. The warehouse manager, warehouse clerks, we recommend that they oversee this and be responsible for monitoring it. Unreleased receipt adjustments. Very familiar with this too. Again, I think it goes back to why are we adjusting it? Did you complete it all the way through? So you're correcting, what you're doing is you're correcting a released receipt. I received 5 and it should have been 4. It could go positive or negative either way. We see this happen sometimes when organizations do a receive all, which must be done very cautiously, because when you receive all, you obviously need to go back to the containers and ensure and audit that what the packing slip says is what we receive. Many times that doesn't happen. So if you receive all your quantity received is going to be off, and it may necessitate a receiving adjustment. It also creates RNI entries. So we received it, but not invoiced, but we received it for the wrong amount, sitting out there until the adjustment is released. So obviously, someone could be looking at more items on the report than there actually should be. Again, the responsibility, warehouse manager, warehouse clerks, reviewed on a daily basis. And this is another item that will prevent you from closing a purchase order. And I've been burned many times on this. When I closed, I thought, where is that unreleased inventory transaction? And if I remember right, it just doesn't really stick out. You really have to kind of go, I think, in the PO adjustment form itself, I remember in version 10, and just kind of monitor that way. So it's pretty important. We all know. Unreleased inventory transactions. This could be the issues, adjustments, transfers. This is a situation where you may have a stock on hand. Your system says one thing, you go to the bin and you count something else. You want to, it necessitates an adjustment. Again, those require a release. Likewise with transfers, they're pulled and delivered to the appropriate location. An example would be going to replenish, where you have a situation where you're replenishing one bin from another bin, receiving bins, and it gets transferred. When the inventory gets low, but the transaction has not been released. So again, it's the same situation that we've been talking about. You've got an unreleased, it impacts the stock on hand from one location or bin to the next. And this is another item where you cannot close the month with an unreleased inventory transactions. Issues, transfers, adjustments. Again, the responsibility would be for the inventory manager to review that on a daily basis. Managed purchase request. This is where the requisitions have been run, the purchase requests have gone into the queue, and there's been missing information on the requisition. So it's important to check the system to resolve those issues. That job that creates the purchase orders will not pick up anything missing, for example, the buyer, vendor, or cost. So it's going to require vigilant review from the buyers as they they may be assigned to the requesting location, which helps a lot. I think it helps resolve that. But again, reviewing it, getting those issues resolved, that missing information, they may have to make it a single PO. I've seen that happen. Break it out, making sure all that's done and taken care of, and the process flows properly. The responsibility here is the buyer. And again, if I had anything else to include on that, I don't think so. So I'm going to transition to Betzy, who will cover a couple of daily monitorings as well as weekly and monthly. Any questions at this point?
There's no questions on the chat either, David. So I'll
Okay,
start.
all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Once again, this is Betzy. I am going to go over some of the EDIs and some of the daily, weekly, and monthly items that supply chain should be monitoring, and they're very important for month-end close. So I'm going to start with the EDI acknowledgement results and other PO confirmations. This is to save time, downstream issues, items issues, quantity issues, and cost variance issues. It is very important that the buyers to be reviewing the purchase orders confirmation they receive back from the vendor to manage discrepancies before the product is received or invoice entered. And those issues sometimes could be with the item number, the quantity, cost, unit, and other unit of measures. For example, the buyers can also place orders for one case and it might come 12 each. And when we actually look at the PO order, it's incorrect, the unit of measure. So if this is monitored daily, when it comes in and it's actually updated via the PO, once the invoice comes in and it matches automatically to the automatic matching daily process that you would have, it would avoid a lot of problems at the end for month-end closing. So if this is done daily, at least looking at it towards the end of the day when the invoices start coming in, is that normally at the end of the day, depending how you have your jobs running. So this is something that it's very important that the buyers to look at. Also, if you're using 855's acknowledgments coming in, it is also very, very important that the discrepancies are also monitored, because when the EDI carrier comparisons POs are issued, the acknowledgements are sent back. And you can make your price corrections. You could update your POs before the automatic matching starts. So this is something that I also, as a end user, used to like to do, because it makes it easier for both the supply chain and finance side to work accordingly. So that way, when month end comes, you don't have the problem that you're closing items and you can't close the items like David mentioned before, because the invoice cannot be released because either the PO created a buyer message because either the quantity or the amount is unit cost is incorrect. Next slide. Here, reviewing the shipment list. It's important when using supply chain. The MSCM is used. Not everybody uses the MSCM, but it's something that is very common and it's very recommendable to use. That way you can see what's going on. I mean, it's something that we recommend the users to look at. Reviewing the shipment list was the status of print, ship, specifically important, like I said, when you use the MSCM. Shipments on demand from the warehouse from requisitions where you are filing stock unit of measure. Sometimes the shipments can get left in print status, which means that the picking to the order has not even begun. And this happens whether or not you're using the handheld. You want to make sure you do have shipments or demand on the warehouse from requisitions. Are you filling the stock inventory? So we have to make sure that all these requisitions are released. So when they are released and they're not on hold, because that way your inventory is also incorrect. And sometimes you'll run a report at the end of the month and they'll say you can't close the month because you have open shipments. So you also want to monitor all that, all the requisitions are all say status shipped, not waiting to ship or not unreleased. Next slide. We also have shipments received, but not invoiced. That normally is a weekly report that we also should monitor. And we call it, a lot of people just call it R&I. So it's kind of like a little bit tricky because some people say, oh, I don't know what this means. Sometimes we can just figure this out. For me, this is one of the most important things of the process with month-end close. And this has two options, because it is some items is showing that it was received, but it's not invoiced. And sometimes you have statements from the vendors that come in and actually the shipment is there, or AP matched the invoice without the actual PO. So we have to make sure that, okay, so we need to fix this. So let's correct this and actually either archive the receiver because it was actually paid and not matched with the PO, and we're gonna have this receiver hanging for a couple of months there. And when you look at it, the invoice is already paid. So there's no use for us to not monitor this. And I recommend myself as an end user that I was, and as a supervisor for the department, I feel that this is something that it should be monitored weekly, not wait to the end of the month. So I just feel that cleaning up this is something that will help a lot. And I see it both ways. It'll help a lot on the supply chain side, and it also will help a lot on the finance side when you're closing your books on the general ledger side. Because once you close the PO side and the inventory side, all these general ledger postings come up, and then you'll have received not invoices, and you're showing all these money out there that is coming and it's not, it's not paid, but we have the merchandise, and sometimes this is overstating the actual dollars amount that we actually have. And it doesn't, it's a little bit tricky to work it weekly, but it makes a difference towards the end of the month. Next slide. Now we have the invoice not received also. So this is an INR, which is invoice not received report. The INR shows the listing of invoices that have been entered against a purchase order, but no receipts are available to match. There are two ways to clean up this list. You may find after researching you can in fact receive the goods if you have been received, for maybe the PO just got put away on the shelf without being received by accident, or if you don't have centralized receiving, maybe the department forgot to receive it. Whatever the reason, but you go ahead and receive the goods, that will remove those lines from the INR. You should also have AP remove the invoice from the system if the vendor made a mistake. So maybe after doing your research, you find that the vendor invoiced you for goods that didn't actually ship instead of using a credit memo. They may just issue a new invoice in which you can have AP remove the old one. You may choose to run this report a few days before you check your check run, so you can make sure you clean up, you get done, will make it one next check run. You can filter the list by the vendor, by buyer, vendor date range, so it makes it very easy to use. I work with a client where the buyers were responsible for working the INI for invoices against their POs that are not due within a week. We would recommend for each buyer to be responsible for managing and working their own INR based on the purchase orders they have created, and working with the vendor to track down where the POs are. A buyer could also look the unreleased receipts listing to confirm the receipt wasn't started or not released. If your INR does not create a journal entry at the end of the month. So I mean, like I'm repeating myself, cleanup is the main goal and the main green light for everybody towards month end. And we're focused this for mostly to be able to clean up and to avoid all this tracking of the end of the month, that I can't close this, I delay this, I delay the PO closing, I delay the general ledger closing, and you have all these messages when you're trying to close. Next slide. Unreleased requisition listings. There's a lot of training opportunities on this. Users did not realize it was unreleased. It was unreleased by an approval with notes, and somebody forgot to look at it. And it also could be an IPA flow that you could be using on your end. It's my recommendation that you will want to monitor unreleased requisitions older than 1 week. Either the requester started a requisition that they did not intend to submit because they were searching for information, or accidentally forgot to click the release button. After you complete your research, you can either delete or release the requisition. During the first weeks of go live, especially if this is for a new client not familiar with Infor, they may forget to hit release button, which ultimately submits the requisition, or maybe they are still getting used to the navigation and somehow created a bunch of requisition headers with no lines. Requesters are certainly not creating recs for the fun of it. If they are creating recs because they have a need for goods, so making sure that they are releasing them or deleting them to keep the system clean for good practice. And this happens sometimes when you first start, that you're not used to of hitting the release button, or you doing a search by item and you're actually in an actual requisition, and you just go to the other screen and you find what you're looking for, and you just forget to release the requisition. And there could be, several reasons for the unreleased requisitions. As a good life, a good life, you might identify more training opportunities for the requesters. which it could be recommendable also. And if also you can train requesters to keep an eye on their own unreleased requisitions along with into all recs menu, and they could there's a search bar there, and they can list all their requisitions, and they can see whether their requisitions have been released or they're still on hold. There's a reason they could be there by mistake, like I said before. They're doing a research, they forgot to release it, or since they're new with the system, they just forgot to hit release, or they can just, they're not going to use it, they can just delete it. We want all requesters to monitor this themselves, but then also, however, was responsible for training requesters to monitor this as a high-level opportunity for everybody. This is something that should be done either, we could do it weekly. Sometimes people want to go back during the daily and look at it daily, but it's recommendable for weekly to clear this. And this is the responsibility of the requester also. Next slide, please. The unreleased purchase order listing. This is critical, very critical. You have a lot of POs that are unreleased, either has been sent to the vendor to all, and an update revision was made, and you forgot to release the PO, or you actually went and, like I said before, you got a PO variance or unit measure variance. You went back to the PO and you did your change, you hit the button change, and you forgot to select unrelease and release final again. Once it goes back into the queue and it's ready to go, whether it's going to go EDI, is it going to go, it's going to be emailed to the vendor. But if you don't release it at the end of the month, you're going to have POs without being unreleased. As a note, if you already issued the PO to the vendor and you are creating a revision that you do not want to send to the vendor again, please make sure that on the header details on the revised issue method is set up as paper. This will generate a new PO document to view, but not to go out to the vendor again. You can also set this under the purchasing vendor. Now I'm going to go to the monthly supply chain task list. Slide 19. Okay, so on the monthly, open receiving buyer messages, unreleased PO receipts, unreleased adjustments, and unreleased inventory transactions. This is a list of the items we review which are going to prevent you from closing the period. So again, we recommend to review these at least one day before you plan your closing, so you have less issues when you do your close. And as we saw as we were going on, the open receipt buyer message, unreleased PO receipts, and the receipts and adjustments and inventory transactions is something that I recommend either they can work them daily, weekly, monthly. Questions? I know I went a little bit fast, but you know. David, are there any questions on the chat?
Don't see
No.
any.
No questions in the chat.
Yeah, I want to add something to what we discussed, and it kind of goes back to the story I told at the beginning. As we all know, many there's a physical location involved here. Your warehouse, your buyers may be separated. I was very fortunate in the situation I was in. We were all there together. I had the buyers around me. I could go through one door outside and go into the warehouse. Sometimes it would be a challenge just on the communication side. You're frantically sending an email to someone that may or may not answer. Then you've got finance waiting for you to close. So these can also be turned into metrics to see how you're doing each month. Just as a suggestion. So again, it's something we need to take seriously, and I hope this helped. All right, if there's no questions, then Dave.
All right, thank you. Well, great session, and thanks to everybody that attended. If you enjoyed today's webinar, we do have another webinar starting at 1 o'clock. A Beginner's Guide to IPAs. It's an encore presentation that received a lot of good feedback, so we're rolling through it again and hope you can join. Additionally, for the month of July, we're going to have a new webinar series rolling out. Please look to social media or our website for dates and times. And if you want to register, you can either send molly.velasco@balesllc.com an email, or go to our website and there's a link to register for future webinars out there. For closing thoughts, if you go to the next slide, I'll leave you with a closing thought. We wanted you to be aware that we have a service called Coffee with Consultants. If you have any questions about what you saw today, or any questions related to anything related to the Infor system and products you own, please reach out to us via our website. We'll connect you with a consultant who will spend a half an hour with you at no charge over coffee, tea, or whatever your preferred beverage is, and they will answer any questions you have related to anything related to your Infor system. Please take advantage of it. It's a great service. It's access to a really talented team of people at no charge. Hope you all have a good rest of your day and a great weekend. And again, thank you for attending.
Thank you.